pase, pierna derecha, directo al arco, ¡golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today for Tuesday, April 24th, 2018. Joining me on the line, as always, Duane Rollins. Duane, good morning.
Good morning. Here we are. If you hear a bit of an echo, it's because the studios, the famed studios on my end, are going to be moving very soon. So we're in a half-empty house here in the city of Toronto. I feel that I should probably briefly mention yesterday's events in the sense that we're going to just continue living our life because that's the way to approach these things at this point.
Exactly. It's not the first time that we do shows. We've been doing shows together for 5 years, and there's been a lot of terrible things happening. And this is always our thought process. We share our thoughts and our emotions with everyone involved in what happened in Toronto yesterday. We hope that our listeners are safe and are okay. We hope that everyone is safe and are okay. But let's talk about soccer, Duane.
Sure.
Let's talk about the weekend. Let's talk about the weekend medals. The Boule de Bois, Boule de Bronze, Boule de Silver, and Ballon d'Or of week number 8 in MLS. Duane, I will start with you. I have a feeling that our Boule de Bois are similar. So I'll let you start with your Boule de Bois for week number 8.
Well, I mean, I guess I could go with the overall Canadian performances, or I could go with Greg Vanney rotating so strongly, or I could go with the Impact's inability to hold the lead. But I'm going to go with Carl Robinson. I'm going to go with Carl Robinson because I have this hunch that he's either lost that room, to use that sports cliche, or he's lost ideas, because this is a team that seems completely rudderless right now. I know it's only been 2 weeks, and I know that they had some success early on, but the fall from grace in the last couple of weeks hasn't just been like a slump. It's been dramatic. There's been a lack of discipline. There's been a lack of ideas once Kamara went out. I don't know if you can build a club around the idea of having one sort of poacher up front and sort of just getting him the ball, because if he goes down and he's not a young man anymore, well, we're seeing what we're getting here, and it ain't been pretty for the Whitecaps so far.
Yeah. And the one thing we always talk about Vancouver, too, it's the BC Place pitch. It's not the greatest. And when you're playing in Vancouver, when you haven't been playing your entire career on those type of surfaces, yes, Kai Kamara has played in New England. He knows the feeling a bit, but it's not Columbus Crew Stadium, right? So you do have that feeling, too, that with his injury, the time is going to get him to come back. It really impedes their progress for the Whitecaps. And now, I have to say, it's a very deserving Boule de Bois when we're looking at sometimes a league passing you by really quickly. Sometimes it happens in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and look, as I said, I think on yesterday's show, I believe it's 4 of the next 6 are at home for the Whitecaps, and this is going to be a vital stretch for them. We need to see something out of them in the next very quickly, because it's hard to justify. And Carl Robinson's been around. Look, this is not personal, obviously. Carl Robinson played at TFC. I have very fond memories of him as a player. I had some tiny dealings with him towards his end of his Toronto time. I was always gracious. So he's a good guy, but at the same time, it's a results-based business, and the Whitecaps seem to be spinning their wheels and maybe even going backwards a little bit right now. And I don't know whether a managerial change would change that. It often doesn't. But at the same time, if you're just looking at the writing on the wall, it's an important stretch for him right now.
Yep, I have to agree with you on this, where the Whitecaps are. Like, it's still early to play out your season. It's still early. I was looking at the standings, and no, we're not going to talk about the standings on the show right now. It's way too early. But there is some aspect of you don't want to create a bigger gap than 4-6 points to where you really want to end up at the end of the season, because it's going to get more complicated. And yes, the 4 out of 6 games at home for the Whitecaps will be crucial, even though we're still early this season. My Boule de Bois for week number 8, Duane, we've talked about the Canadian teams yesterday. I decided to go somewhere else. Decided to go where it's a little sunny and where it's a little warmer, and where, well, they're having trouble figuring out who should play where. And that's LA. And that's the LA Galaxy. With Zlatan Ibrahimovic scored the first game with his 2 goals in the 4-3 win against LAFC. Started off really, like, it hit the ground running for Zlatan in LA. But then, things have not necessarily been as easy. And more playing time Zlatan has with LA, the less productive it is becoming. Not just for him, but especially for everyone around him. This has been well known in Zlatan's history. When he goes to a club and he's in a system with either two striker or with another prominent striker close to him, he takes the wind out of their sails just because of himself being Zlatan, taking so much of the subconscious passes of the players on the pitch. What I mean, Duane, is if you are a player with the ball, you see Kamara and you see Zlatan, both kind of open but not, who do you pass the ball to?
Well, probably Zlatan, especially if you grew up watching him play at higher levels, for sure. Kevin, I don't know if Zlatan is going to score goals this year. He will get some audacious goals. There's no doubt about it, because what Zlatan does very well is he's able to find shooting opportunities where most players can. And getting the ability to get shots off and get shots on goal is a key component to the sport, a key component to an offensive player. One of the key metrics you look at when you're trying to find out who's successful, who's going to be good. And Zlatan, at least in MLS, is averaging about 3.2 right now in terms of his scored ranking stats tracking there. It's about 3.2 shots on goal per game, and that's pretty high. That would be amongst the league leaders. However, I'm going to give you another number from Who Scored, which really jumped out at me when I was looking at it. And it's early, but it tracks his whole career. He's right now averaging a little under 17 passes per game, passes attempted per game.
That's
and
terrible.
He's only actually correctly hitting them in 50% of the time. So his passing accuracy is about 50%. He's only passing the ball about 17 times a game. That's absurdly low.
Yeah, it is. And the chemistry between Kamara and Zlatan in a 4-4-2 with two strikers up top has not been fruitful. They cannot find each other. The movement is not fluid. You do not find each other's lanes, overlapping, crossing, finding ways to be effective, which is the definition of a striker. You kind of have to find ways. And yes, you mentioned how Zlatan will find ways to shot on target. But, Duane, we know how MLS works now. We've seen players trying to do things by themselves. And in 2018, you might be Zlatan. Even by yourself, you can't win. And you need to pass the ball to your teammates in position where you actually put them into a scoring chance. And those are the little details that will need to be worked on for LA and Sigi Schmidt. But the pressure is building already. And with the amount of money, but it's more the amount of eyes that Zlatan brings to the team. There's a lot of scrutiny now. And you kind of have to make it work, whatever it takes. And it might need a change of mentality, philosophy, tactical abilities, and we'll see if it improves over the next few weeks. But so far, outside of the first game and his third goal in the other game, it's been lackluster the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, look, as I said, I suspect he's going to, it depends on whether Sweden picks him for the World Cup. And there's a real debate amongst serious soccer observers of whether Sweden should be picking him up for the World Cup. They qualified without him. To thrust a personality like that into the team, and he hasn't had a great international career either when you look at it objectively. He's been okay, but he's certainly never taken Sweden even up to levels that they had, before him, before when Larson was their big guy, right? Like he's never really held them go up or even got them consistently into major competitions, really. And he retired thinking they weren't going to qualify for the World Cup, and for him to parachute in. I imagine there's a lot of people in Sweden, and I don't speak Swedish, so I can't really monitor their media, but I suspect there's probably a debate happening in that country about whether they should be even thinking about him. And it's a reasonable debate, because when you look at his numbers at United, and there's a lot of factors there. They were terrible. Like, they weren't just, below par or below his what you'd expect out of him. They were actually, like, amongst the worst in the league. He's come over to MLS and done a little bit better, but there's still some troubling aspects to his game. His inability to make space for himself. Think about his goal. Everyone's talking about his wonder goal. Yeah, he scored from half.
Well, because because Tyler Miller was way too advanced. That's why he scored. Not because it was a great shot. It was a shot that, like you mentioned, he's going to find scoring opportunities, shooting opportunities that other less confident players won't take. He's going to take them because he's taken them all his life, and that won't change. And that was one of the instances. And the header, that goal was just a great cross by Ashley Cole, and he put his head at the right spot. But MLS is now a league that speed is important. Not as much as back in the day. You do have maybe more of a tactical, technical second on the ball more. But you still need pace. And right now, Zlatan, as a two forward with Kamara, the way they need to work together, you need one of them to use their pace. And if Kamara wants to be in the right spot, he's not necessarily going to take all those runs to liberate some space for Zlatan. And we're going to continue to see what we have seen. So, yeah, that's my boule de bois. It's not necessarily Zlatan himself, but it's how to confuse teammates by bringing Zlatan to a team and then telling players like Cavani back in 2015, okay, sir, you're going to play on the wings. I've never played that before. It doesn't matter. Well, I guess it does.
Yeah, look, as I said, if he plays the full season for LA, I suspect Zlatan will end up 10, 15 goals, for sure, because he does have the ability to finish. But whether or not that's going to add 10 or 15 goals or even 5 or 6 goals to what LA would have got otherwise is the debate to have. And I'm not convinced yet that he's going to do that. He's certainly going to benefit MLS and LA in the sense that he's getting more tickets sold, he's getting more jerseys sold and things like that. But is he going to be of benefit overall? There's your debate. There's your question.
All right.
You look at a guy like David Villa and how he incorporates the whole team and is able to excel because of that. He absolutely is an example of how these big names can come in, but I don't know. It's early days, so yeah. I'm not willing to write him off or have the parade for him just yet.
No, exactly. And there's a certain humility you need to have when you're a top-rated player coming into MLS. You need to kind of know that your teammates are not going to be at your level. And that's going to go, I'm going to talk about this in my gold, in my Ballon d'Or. I have another situation that I'm going to explain and talk, and it does involve the entirety of a team, and you need to include your teammates. And as a DP, it reminds me of, okay, so I'm going to put it in layman's terms so people understand what I mean. When you're a worker at some place and you're the superstar worker, you're employee of the week for like 20 years straight, you've been there for 20 years, you know your job to the top of your fingers, and you got new employees coming. You got two ways to look at it, right? Because the damn new employees don't know what they're doing. They don't have the experience. They don't have the know-how. They're just doing whatever they think they're best, but they're not necessarily using the way we do stuff around here. Or you can look at it the other way. Be like, okay, I'm the one who has the experience, who has the know-how, the knowledge. I'm going to help those people through. I'm going to teach them. I'm going to train them, and I'm going to show them how we do things around here. So quickly they're going to become productive member of our small society. In the sports world, as a DP, you can blame and complain that your teammates are not at the right spot when you're trying to pass them the ball, or you can teach them and make sure that you put them in a position where they can shine. And it's just two ways to look at the same problem, but it's interesting to see which way Zlatan will use in the next few weeks.
Fair enough. One last quick thought. Those 2 wonder goals, the more we're watching LAFC this year, the more you chalk those up as much to do with defensive creativity, we'll call it, or uniqueness defensively for LA.
Exactly. All right, your boule de bronze for week 8, Duane.
Well, speaking of LAFC, I'm going to give the boule de bronze to the LAFC Montreal Impact game in general for pure chaotic entertainment value. And now, an Impact fan out there might not have found it as entertaining as a neutral would have, but oh my God, when you have that many goals and that much back and forth and a hat trick in the first half, then a red card, then a charge back. I mean, that's is it good soccer? I don't know, but it's pretty entertaining.
It doesn't matter if it's good or bad soccer. It's soccer, and it was fun to watch. It was a beautiful day. It was a fun afternoon at Stade Saputo. Just don't remember the score. But no, I have to agree with you. And my boule de bronze is similar. My boule de bronze is going to Marc Dos Santos as assistant head coach with LAFC. We've talked about Marc Dos Santos many, many times, Duane, in our history of the show. We had him on a few times. I had him on my friend's show just Saturday. I was able to exclusively talk to him before he left after the game, and he was a little hard to find. I was lucky enough to be right in front of him, so I had the chance to talk to Mark Dos Santos. First of all, Mark has always been a class act, and in the situation when we talked to Mark Dos Santos, Duane, he was always in a head coach position, and there's one way to react and to act and to answer questions when you're a head coach. When you're an assistant coach, it's a bit more different. It's a different. And the respect that Mark Dos Santos showed to Bob Bradley and to the entire staff by just the way he answered my question in French, and I'm going to translate it quickly for our English listeners here. I'm asking a few questions to Mark. Mark Dos Santos, how would you describe today's day, the day at Stade Saputo? And I made sure that I was not talking about the game because he's not the head coach. It's not his say. And his first words of his mouth is like, I'm not going to talk about the game. It's not mine to talk about. I'll talk about my experience here. Love always being Stade Saputo. But those little details, those little respect details that shows a mentality, an attitude, and the respect he shows to the people he work with, this is just an example of how great of a man, a coach, and a leader of man Mark Dos Santos is and will be very shortly as a head coach in Major League Soccer.
Yeah, you'd think so. I mean, I suspect this is a one-year stop. I think Mark Dos Santos quite clearly has aspirations to be a head coach in Major League Soccer, but even if an MLS job doesn't open up, I mean, there is going to be a whole bunch of jobs opening up in Canada, obviously. He'll, I think be back as a head coaching position after a year in LAFC, but I think
I was going to say his tactical job on the day, on the game, during the game Saturday is he's the one that's with the substitutes and preparing them for their walk on the pitch. And you really see an influence that he has on the players and how the players come into the pitch. It was actually impressive to see LAFC adjust in that game. And as much as we want to talk about a lot of things, Bob Bradley outcoached Rémi Garde on Saturday. And it was a bit of another discovery day for Rémi Garde. But moving on to your Boule de Silver.
Yeah, well, just real quick, last thought on MDS. It's smart for him to get an assistant coaching position behind Bob Bradley, because what that's done is it's sort of opened him up to the networking within the American circles. His weakness, I'm not belaboring this, I'm just saying it bluntly, his weakness was his passport. Everyone can look at his resume, but he didn't have the same connections that some of the American coaches do that get opportunities in Major League Soccer with lesser resumes. Now that he's been hooked up with someone as well known, as respected as Bob Bradley, it's going to take one phone call, and is this guy for real? Yeah. And then they're going to look at him in every serious way as they would have any other American coach. And I think that's a key. My silver, Kevin, is going to go to Nacho Piatti. Now, normally this is a gold medal performance, and I was ready to fill in my my ballot at halftime of the Impact game, but
for player of the week,
things changed.
Yeah.
But so I can't, with a losing performance, make my player of the week vote, and I didn't. I'll get to that in a minute. But I do think that I want to acknowledge what was a great performance by a guy that we've talked about a few times already in this sort of segment as being one of the most underrated players in the league. And he's not going to probably be talked about as MVP again this year, but he really should be in every year, because especially if you consider it, the literal meaning of the award, most valuable player to his team. That's got it. Conversation each time.
Take him out of Montreal's lineup. Montreal hasn't won anything this year so far. If you take him out of the lineup, it's just 6 straight defeats. Actually, no, it would be 8 straight defeats. 7. Anyways, 7. Yeah, 4 in a row. So 3 in a row. Sorry, 3 in a row and 2 in a row before. So that's 5 defeats, 2 draws for the 2 wins for the Montreal Impact. But I have to agree with you. And my silver is to Nacho Piatti as well. I did vote for him for player of the week because I was there on Saturday, and I don't think there's any performance by one player, like as a whole, not just the goals, but more like the lanes he was creating, the work hard. He's a workhorse in 2018, tracking back box to box, able to find space, goes back deeper, even though he's more placed as a forward. He's a bit more up front. With Vargas, he was able to find passing lanes, track back, get the ball, create his own opportunities, and then create goals. Oh no, Nacho Piatti for me is, yes, an underrated player. But when we talked about Zlatan, Duane, I've talked about how you need to include your teammates. You need to make everyone around you a foot taller, better. And Nacho does that. Yes, it's by necessity, you're going to say. Doesn't matter the reasoning behind it. He's doing it. And Nacho Piatti has answered the call of his new contract and maybe new responsibility, saying, Nacho, we had big players here before. Drogba was here and other players while you were here, but now it's your team. This team is going to be as good as you want it to be and as bad as you allow it to be. So it's on you, my friend. Whatever you can do, we need it. And Nacho's answered the call.
Yeah, no, so he's actually in many ways having one of his better seasons already than in his whole career, and he's had a remarkable career in Major League Soccer. So to say that his start, to me, has been as impressive as in any other years is high compliment. This is a player that if he, not to belabor the Canadian thing, but if Nacho Piatti were an LA Galaxy player, if he were a Seattle Sounder, if he were even a guy like DC United or something like that, this would be a player that would be on every marketing campaign in Major League Soccer. But because he's in Montreal, this is just the reality of
because he speaks more Spanish and French and English. So that's, I think, has to do with it too. So yeah, it's those two factors. The fact that he's in Montreal and he has more facility, more ease in French and in Spanish than he does in English.
Yeah, precisely. And that plays a role. But nonetheless, I think he's very appreciated in this country, and he's very appreciated amongst informed fans. And I think most of our listeners would count themselves among the most informed of MLS fans, just for the nature of seeking out shows like this. But I think that those that listen to a show like ours, or listen to regular listeners extra on radio, or to read blogs and all that sort of stuff, they know how good Nacho Piatti is. When I say he's underrated, I'm talking about pull a guy out of the stands in Chicago on a random Tuesday in July, right? They might not have the same awareness, and that's too bad because he's one of the more brilliant players in the league, and had a brilliant performance in the first half. And unfortunately for him, the team could not match it the rest of the day. And what I said was a highly entertaining game, but maybe not great for the impact in the end.
Yeah. All right, you're a Ballon d'Or for week number 8.
Quick mention, there were 2 hat tricks in the weekend. I'm not going to give Johnny Russell the other one. I actually did put him as my second place vote on Player of the Week, simply because they won. The problem, and this preamble goes into my goal pick, because there were so many lack of competitive games that I had trouble voting for any player as Player of the Week.
We have the same.
That was involved in a blowout, because it was like, I don't know. So I ended up going with Alderone. Miguel Alderone from Atlanta, because he was a key component to that. He only scored the 1 goal off the penalty too, but he created so much, and he was such a key component to that game in what was a competitive, high-profile game in the weekend. So that's why I ended up going with Alderone, who's been a brilliant player as well. And obviously that's not exactly speaking of guys that can break through the Spanish thing to be seen as the one of the poster boys for the league. He is there. But again, that pick had as much to do with the games that were going on around him as it did with his performance. But nonetheless, I thought that he was brilliant on the day, and Atlanta won the game, and LA didn't just lose it, as we sort of implied in the first part.
No, you're right. And just to finish on Nacho Piatti, the one thing too is Nacho Piatti doesn't want to be a star. He just wants to play soccer. He loves soccer. He loves to play soccer. He's a regular guy who loves to play soccer. Different for other people in other markets. Sometimes you want to be a star. So, not saying Almiron wants to be a star, but he does. So there's a big difference there. And my goal, my Ballon d'Or, is similar to you in the thought process, but I just used a cop out. My gold medal, my Ballon d'Or, goes to Taman Gam for bolstering the offensive sides of every MLS team, for bolstering the amount of goals scored in a weekend, 43 this weekend, and for terrifying defenders, poor defenders. A lot of people are getting new players, more depth with the amount of money injected in Taman Gam, another 1.5 this year added from the last few years. And the teams are using those to get better and more clinical finish players, offensive players. And defenders are now asked to defend against better players than they were over the last few years. And I think it shows. Makes for a lot of goals, makes for a lot of offense, makes for great games. But I kind of feel bad for the defenders.
Goals make games. Goals change games. Goals are what people in MLS management prioritize over all else. Pretty much, and I beat this horse to death and then beat it again once it was dead, to make a new analogy there. For many years now, there's an old cliche in sports: it's offense sells tickets, defense wins championships. Which anyone who takes a look at numbers will quickly demonstrate to you that it is completely false. It's actually the opposite. That the ability to score, the ability to be offensive, is actually what does win championships. So when you look at TAM and the infusion of TAM money into Major League Soccer, almost every single team is using that TAM money to bring in high-end attacking players to bolster their offense. There's a few cases where they brought in defenders, but for the most part, it's attackers. And what we're seeing, I think, right now is the attacking taking over. That it's not that the defending is any worse, but the attacking is so much better right now that the defenders are really trying to catch up. And I think that there will be an adjustment down the line as teams will go, okay, we can't be allowing 4 goals a game. And they might be spending a little bit more money next year on with TAM on some higher-end defenders. But it's not unique in MLS. As I said, the ability to score goals is the biggest determination to winning out there. Look, there's a correlation. Causation and correlation are tied in this particular case. What I did a couple of years ago, Kevin, and I've told this before, real quickly though, is I looked at every major trophy win in MLS history. So the Supporters Shield or MLS Cup. And I then determined whether that team was in the top 5 of offense or the top 5 of defense in the stats for the year. And what I found is something like 80% of the MLS major trophy winners over the years had been in the top 5 of offense, but only like 30% were in the top 5 of defense. That's a very simple sort of evaluation, but it sort of points to what I'm saying. You got to score goals, and it makes sense that MLS teams are spending money the way that they're spending it because it works. And, we saw it with TFC's championship last year. They spent their TAM on Vasquez, and they spent their TAM in the offseason on upgrading offensive players. And I think we're going to continue to see it. But as I said, you got to have some defensive backbone. And the teams that can best do that do tend to succeed a little bit more. But certainly adding to the goals, adding to the excitement, as you say.
We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about the Champions League semifinal of this afternoon.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
You like what we do? You like Canadian soccer as well? Patreon.com/Sports Podcasting Network is where you can take the pledge. $2 a month gives you access to the exclusive Two Solitude Soccer podcast for patrons only. It will be coming out later this evening, and on the next episode, we're dropping some news. We're dropping some knowledge. Everything you ever wanted to know about York 9. Who, when, what? Huh? Exactly. You'll get it all on the next episode of the Two Solitude Soccer Podcast. $2 a month gives you access. And if you give more, trust me, we're working on other projects, and episodes, shows, content for you, for patrons only. Make sure you give your money and put your money where your hobby is. And Duane,
I was going to say much of the bonus content you're getting free will eventually move behind the paywall, and that's just the reality of how we have to operate. Soccer Today, the main show that you're listening to now, will remain free. So if that's all you can afford, then we appreciate you listening. But if you want some more bonus topic and some more in-depth reporting stuff, $2 a month isn't much to ask, and we encourage you. And thank you if you've already supported it.
And there's other ways you can help us as well. If you like what we do, share a like, drop a subscribe, drop a like on the YouTube video. Subscribe to the YouTube video, youtube.com/Sports Podcast Network. Share the shows, retweet. If you do not have the financial means to help us, we still love you. A little bit less, but we still love you a lot, and we still want you to be part of our crew. Help us spread the word, and you can do that with a simple retweet, a simple share, and a simple like. Duane, speaking of like, I've liked one thing that Roma did yesterday, And it's something we don't always talk about, but the class of certain clubs in this sport is really high. And when Roma got to Anfield yesterday for the first time ahead of today's match, they took a wreath of flower. They went to the Hillsborough Memorial, 96 Memorial, dropped the flower, had a moment of silence, and I thought that was very classy.
Yeah, and look, we're coming up to we just passed the anniversary of the date, and thankfully, because it's there was finally a little bit of justice for the '96, that we don't really hear about it as much anymore. But certainly a tragic day that all football fans should always take time to remember in any given year. And there's also lots of other tragedies that have happened out there too that you should always think about. Torino doesn't get talked about a lot. The plane crash there that took one of the best teams in the world away from us and completely turned the fortunes of that team completely around. Torino's still, in Serie A, but they're kind of a yo-yo club. They were amongst the best clubs in the world at the time of that tragedy. There's the Zimbabwe national team crash from years ago. There's stadium disasters in many parts of the world that are just horrific. There was one recently in South Africa. So it's an ongoing battle to keep people safe in the stadiums. And obviously, when you talk about transportation accidents, they're an unfortunate reality. They're going to be there every so often. We just saw it here in this country not too long ago in another sport. And it always tugs at the heartstrings because it's so basic, the idea that you're doing something you love and you die because of it. So, yeah, that's a nice little gesture by Roma. And certainly it's a funny little tie, though, to go back to football. There's really no rivalry there, right? Like there's no history between these clubs. There's no animosity between their fans in any way. It's going to be interesting to watch.
In the 80s, they played against Roma, if I'm not mistaken, in a Champions League game and finished in penalties, no? Or something like that. I know they faced each other in the Champions Cup back then, but anyways. Like you mentioned, though, it's a club that there's no hate. There's like both are equivalent, in my mind, in their own league. Like, if I have to say which Serie A team is the closest to Liverpool, in my mind, it would be Roma. The workers' people. The workers' team. The team of the people. Not the team of the elites, but the team that was successful. That got his fan base organically. That has legends like Totti, who played his entire career there. Those little, like Totti is der Shankly. You have a bit of, for me, they're almost the same philosophy a bit. There's a bit of difference, of course, and there's the whole cup aspect of Liverpool that happened a long, long time ago. But for me, those two teams are they're equals, respectively, in their leagues.
Yeah, certainly nowadays. I mean, I think they've sort of taken that step back, Liverpool, to the point that you view them more as in that 4 to 6 range, as opposed to at the top as you used to in the past. Roma's a funny club too. I live in a predominantly Italian area, right? And you'd be surprised, and I've always was a little surprised when I first started to notice how popular Roma is. You'd think that every Italian is a Juve or an AC Milan fan, but no, there's a ton of Roma fans out there too. It's a club with a lot of support, and it's going to be interesting watching that in this city, especially today, because there are. I've always said that if you probably broke things down and were to take a serious look at what the most popular soccer team in the city of Toronto was, it might be TFC now, maybe just because of the success in the last couple of years and with younger people taking them on. But at least 3 or 4 years ago, I would have pretty much put anything down that the most popular soccer team in the city would have been Liverpool. The support, there's obviously the massive Scallywags. I've talked about that many times in the show over the years. The Scallywags is a Liverpool bar. It will be packed to the gills today for that game. But the other most popular team in the city would be the Italian teams in general. And the Italians flock together in the Champions League too. That they'll drop their club rivalries for an Italian Champions League game. So it'll be interesting to watch this one today.
And it's easier to drop your allegiance to cheer for Roma than it is to drop your allegiance to cheer for Juve or Inter. Anyway, so that's easier if you're outside of maybe being a Lazio fan. If you're another fan of a club and you're neutral, I'm like, oh, okay, I'll cheer on Roma because they're Italian. That's a possibility. But on the pitch, we should have a decent game. We should have an interesting tie. Roma beating Barcelona, Liverpool beating Man City, those two teams beating almost the two favorites of this tournament, finding themselves versus each other in the semifinal. It will be interesting, and yes, of course, a lot of people are complaining. So, tomorrow's game is like the final before with Bayern and Real. Well, Liverpool-Roma, for me, it's almost a sexier tie because, well, I don't see it every damn year, and that's why it's making it a bit sexier. I'm tired of seeing Bayern and Real.
Yeah, I mean, look, yeah, it might be the final before the final. It might be. I mean, they're going to the favorite, whoever wins that for sure, but you're right. At least, I mean, I guess there's no right when you're talking about subjective opinion, but I agree with the subjective opinion that this is the more interesting of the two ties. Bayern and Real Madrid, it's not that it's not interesting. It is it's more of an intellectual interesting as opposed to a primal, like, sporting interest, like, for me, though. You know, Real Madrid kind of crapped the bed in the league and sort of gave up early on, realized that Barcelona, although they still had that perfect season to play for, and Real Madrid's still on the schedule. So that's probably what the only league thing they have left to do is to ruin Barcelona's only thing they're playing for left. So that's kind of interesting. You look at Bayern, who hasn't been pushed all year, so this is maybe the first time that they've been challenged. So there's some intrigue there. But in terms of pure, like, wow, one of these two teams is going to be in the Champions League final, and no one would have saw that coming at the start of the year. Liverpool, Roma has that interest. And, you know, I'll be cheering for Roma, I think, just when it starts because, I don't know, I think because Roma's never been there before, whereas Liverpool, they're a weird team with a Champions League history, and I don't know if I can handle their fans if they win a seventh. That would be really, really hard, I think.
Yeah, just remind them that I haven't won a league in forever, and that Steven Gerrard never won a league. That should do it. That should bring them their smiles back down to a frown really quickly.
There you go.
And by the way, we didn't mention it yesterday too, but May 19th is the FA Cup final. Chelsea beat the replay. They beat Southampton in the weekend 2-0 and will face Manchester United on May 19th. Do not look for me on May 19th. I will be busy. And same thing this afternoon. I'll be busy watching some soccer. For Duane Rollins, I'm Kevin Laramee. Stay tuned. Tomorrow we'll have a World Cup Today show. We're going to have a great guest that you know. If you're listening to this show, we had him on the show before. If you watch TV, well, you watch it on a weekly basis on Sportsnet. And you'll be able to hear him right here tomorrow on World Cup Today. And for Duane Rollins, I'm Kevin Laramee. Don't forget patreon.com/sportspodcastnetwork. Your dollars goes a long way. And until tomorrow, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.